Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, says he's confident a deal to leave the European Union can be reached by mid-October, the deadline set by the other 27 member states. But he says it's right for the government to step up preparations over the summer for the possibility that no agreement is reached. The former Conservative Prime Minister, Sir John Major, warned that a no-deal Brexit could result in dire economic consequences for those, he said, who could least afford it. Here's our political correspondent, Chris Mason.
It sounded like they all agreed, but at the Cabinet meeting last week, some around the table were still unsure about the Prime Minister's plan for Brexit. That's according to the new Brexit Secretary.
I think people need to know that
but he's sounding confident a deal can be done with Brussels.
I'm striving every sinew with our department, with Michel Barnier, who I think is a man that wants to do a deal with us, tremendous pressures on his side, to get the best deal. But we've got to, I think it's the responsible thing to do, to be prepared if those negotiations and the energy and the ambition and the pragmatism we're showing are not reciprocated. The energy that we're going to bring to these negotiations, the ambition and the pragmatism, we get a deal done in October.
The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has spent the day in Dorset at the left-wing gathering the Tolpuddle Martyrs Festival. He is scathing about what he sees as government dithering.
It's 2 years and a bit since the referendum. Surely they should be in a better position now to know what kind of arrangements we're going to have in the future. And I just get the feeling that the tail is wagging the dog in the Tory party. Those that want no deal seem to be ruling the roost, and they're pushing for that. No deal would be a very, very bad situation.
If the arguments about the UK and the EU sound just a tad familiar...
Morning, Mr. Major.
This man was furious with Conservative Eurosceptics a quarter of a century ago, and he still is.
If we crash out without a deal, the people who have least are going to be hurt most. It would be a terrible betrayal of the interests of everyday people who really are not political.
Sir John cited a government forecast suggesting the northeast of England, which endorsed Brexit, would take the biggest economic hit in the UK if there's no deal struck with the EU. He also said another referendum would be morally justified. So do people in Middlesbrough agree?
Probably reconsider another referendum due to the fact that they might not want to leave because quite a lot of jobs would be lost.
I think basically what we should do is get no agreement on Brexit, we just walk away.
A new referendum just means that there's an opportunity for it to go back to how it was, and I think we could do with change.
Much to the government's relief, MPs finish here for the summer on Tuesday, but then the Prime Minister and her senior team will fan out around Europe, trying to sell her vision of Brexit. Chris Mason, BBC News at Westminster.
The new Brexit Secretary has been out and about trying to sell Theresa May's Chequers white paper on Brexit. Dominic Raab insisted that he did think a deal was possible by October, but that not to prepare for no deal would be irresponsible. So how are the government's checkered efforts to achieve an orderly Brexit going down with Conservative Party members? Siobhan Kennedy has been to Essex to find out.
This is just not Brexit. This is not what people voted for.
But I think she just needs to get tough.
She's got to make her mind up. Either she is carrying the will of the people out or she's going off on her own agenda. And I believe she's going off on her own agenda.
Grassroots Tories on the outskirts of London talking Theresa May. Here in the Brexit heartland of Hornchurch in Essex, they voted 70% to leave the EU. Now they say they feel betrayed.
That white paper doesn't reflect what the majority of people think. Everyone knows we need a deal, but that white paper does not reflect what we voted for.
Dominic Raab, the new Brexit Secretary, is trying to persuade them and Brussels the white paper is the best hope of reaching a deal, despite the fact it ties the UK to certain EU trade rules. On his maiden round of TV interviews today, he said he'd focus unflinchingly to reach a deal, but talk of contingency planning wasn't far behind.
If we have no deal, we want to make sure that we're prepared at the border with the knock-on effects that that would have if, on the EU side, they take the worst-case scenario approach, which is, frankly, irrational. I'm confident we won't get there, but even if we did, we will have the planning in place, the preparation in place, the operational matters in place, from the infrastructure to the planning laws, to deal with that.
The bosses of ports like Immingham and Grimsby aren't confident. Last week, the man in charge told Channel 4 News that no progress meant no choice but to plan for a hard Brexit, where just a 2-minute delay per truck would bring the port to a standstill, with cars, components and fresh produce all stacked up. Something Mr Raab insists he's prepared for.
We're making sure, both in the allocation of money, £3 billion extra allocated at last budget, through operational things like hiring extra border staff, through the legal arrangements, both domestic but also the treaty arrangements, that we're ready for any and every eventuality. And we will gradually and responsibly, which is the right thing for a government to do, set out more of the detail of that through technical notices.
He certainly gave a not-so-technical notice to the EU today on the front cover of the Sunday Telegraph. The Brexit secretary warning plain and simple that no trade agreement meant the UK could withhold its £39 billion divorce bill from the EU. Jeremy Corbyn, attending a festival in Dorset today and parading under an EU flag, said that Theresa May was letting the Brexiteers push her into a no-deal.
I just get the feeling that the tail is wagging the dog in the Tory party. Those that want no deal seem to be ruling the roost, and they're pushing for that. No deal would be a very, very bad situation.
But the reality is the public also has little faith in Theresa May's Brexit plan. A poll today showing only 12% think her Chequers white paper would be good for Britain, while 43% reject it. And among Tory members, the numbers are even worse. 60% disliking the plan when it was first introduced, up to 67% against it now. Back at the Conservative Social Club in Essex, the activists couldn't be more adamant.
I personally feel that no deal is better than a bad deal.
No deal is better than Chequers?
No deal is better than Chequers. I think so.
I can't see it can be worse than accepting some of the terms that are in that white paper.
A sobering message for Theresa May, but as she goes north tomorrow to continue her charm offensive, she'll be hoping to convince voters it's a case of a glass at least half full.